When my net worth was appraised at $20 million, my son texted me that very same afternoon. "Mom, family dinner at 7 o'clock in the evening. We need to talk. Urgent." I stared at that message for several minutes. Julian. My son Julian, who had gone months without calling me, without asking how I was doing, without even sending a casual text, and there he was, summoning me with that sudden urgency, with that formal tone trying to disguise something I already knew all too well. So, I decided to show up with something they did not expect, the complete truth about who really controlled that fortune, and the absolute certainty that this time I would not stay silent. But to understand how I arrived at that moment, I need to go back 3 months, to the night of my 60th birthday, the night that marked the end of an illusion I had held on to for far too many years. I prepared that party with a care that now embarrasses me to remember. I bought the food they liked, not what I preferred. I decorated the living room with fresh flowers. I used the fine china, the set I kept for special occasions. I did my hair. I put on a dress I had bought especially for that night. 60 years. A major milestone, I thought. My children would come, they would bring their spouses. Maybe there would be laughter, hugs, photographs. Maybe for one night, I would feel like I was still important to them. The table was ready at 6 o'clock in the evening. I had told them we would start at 7. I put on soft jazz. I lit the candles. I checked everything twice. Everything had to be perfect. 7 o'clock at night. No one. 7:30. The phone remained silent. 8 o'clock at night. The food was starting to get cold. 9 o'clock at night. The candles were burning down slowly, just like my hope. I called Julian. He did not answer. I texted him. Nothing. I tried Samantha, my daughter. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. I left a message trying to sound casual, asking if they were running late. They never replied. At 10 o'clock at night, I blew out the candles. I packed the food into containers I knew no one would come to claim. I took off the new dress and put on my usual comfortable clothes. I sat on the sofa, in the dark, looking at that empty table I had prepared with so much love. I did not cry that night. The pain was too deep for tears. It was something heavier, denser. It was the final realization that to my children, I simply did not matter enough. The next day, Julian sent a text. "Sorry, Mom, a work thing came up. I will call you." He never called. Samantha sent another one 2 days later. "Sorry, Mom, got my schedules crossed. I will swing by to see you soon." She did not come either. Empty excuses. White lies that hurt more than the silence. That night of my 60th birthday, something changed in me. It was not dramatic or sudden. It was silent, like a door closing softly but firmly. I understood that I had spent decades waiting for crumbs of affection from people who had turned me into something optional, something they could discard when it suited them. My children, Julian and Samantha, the children I raised alone after their father abandoned us when they were little, the children for whom I worked 2 jobs so they would never lack anything, the children who grew into adults who looked at my life with disdain. Julian was always critical. Since he was young, he had that way of making comments that sounded like advice, but were actually disguised reproaches. "Mom, you should take better care of your image. Mom, those clothes are out of style. Mom, you do not understand how the world works now." He married a woman who shared that view. Someone who came from old money, with contacts, with that veneer of success Julian always chased. They never felt I was good enough for their social circle. Samantha was different, but equally painful. She was simply ashamed of my job, of my modest house, of the way I spoke, of the way I dressed. When she got engaged to a man of good standing, the visits became spaced out until they almost disappeared. Both of them built lives where I was an uncomfortable presence, a working-class mother who did not fit into their aspirations of status. They called me occasionally, always in a rush, always with excuses to hang up quickly. The visits were brief, tense, full of awkward silences, but I kept waiting. I kept believing something would change, that eventually they would see everything I had done for them, that the love I had given them for years would finally be reciprocated. My 60th birthday was my last hope, a major celebration, an opportunity to reconnect, to feel, even if just for one night, that I was still their mother, and that meant something. And they abandoned me. During the weeks following that birthday, something in me hardened, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I stopped expecting their calls. I stopped inventing excuses to contact them. I stopped pretending that their indifference did not hurt. I focused on myself, on my work, on my investments, on the projects I had been quietly building for years while they assumed I was just an older woman with no resources and no future. And then came the valuation. $20 million. Properties I had bought strategically, lots of land I acquired when no one wanted them, and that were now worth fortunes. Investments I had made with the money I saved, working tirelessly. For years, my children assumed I lived paycheck to paycheck, that I barely had enough to survive. They never asked. They were never really interested in my life. If they had, they would have discovered that their mother, whom they underestimated so much, had built a considerable estate. The afternoon I received the official valuation documents. My phone rang. It was Julian. "Mom, family dinner at 7 o'clock in the evening. We need to talk. Urgent." "No, hi, Mom, how are you?" "No. It has been a while since we talked." Just a direct summons. Urgent. Almost like an order. I responded with a single word. "Where?" He gave me the address of an upscale steakhouse downtown. The kind of place they had never invited me to before. The kind of place where my children went with their important friends, with their business contacts, but never with me. I hung up the phone and stared at that address. I knew exactly what that urgent dinner meant. I knew it was not love, nor regret, nor a desire to reconnect. It was interest, pure and simple self-interest. Someone had told them about my assets. Someone had mentioned the $20 million. And now, suddenly, I was relevant. Now I was worth a family dinner. The irony was so obvious, it almost made me smile. 3 months ago, they left me alone on my birthday. Now they were summoning me with urgency. So I decided to show up, but not as the submissive mother I had always been. Not as the woman who accepted crumbs of attention with gratitude. This time I would go prepared, aware, with my eyes wide open. To understand why this sudden invitation did not surprise me, you need to know who Julian and Samantha really are. Not the children I imagined having when I held them as babies in my arms, but the people they became. Julian was born when I was 23. His father left us when he was barely 5. I got up every morning before dawn for years to work, first cleaning offices, then at a factory, later as an administrative assistant. All so he would have what I never had. I paid for his entire college education. Every semester, every book, every supply he needed. I worked double shifts so he could study without worries. He graduated with an MBA, with honors. I was at his graduation, sitting in the back rows because I arrived late from work. I remember that after the ceremony, when I went to hug him, he looked around as if verifying who was watching us. His hug was quick, uncomfortable. Even then, I was something he preferred to keep discreet. He got a job at a major corporation. He met his wife in that corporate environment. She came from a wealthy family, with a well-known last name, with connections. When he introduced me to her, I noticed how she appraised me from top to bottom, as if calculating whether I represented a problem for her image. The wedding was elegant, expensive, in a ballroom I never could have afforded. I sat at a side table, far from the important guests. During the speech, Julian thanked his mentors, his friends, his wife's family. He mentioned me briefly, almost like an obligation. After that, the visits became sporadic. He always had meetings, commitments, work events. When I called him, he answered with monosyllables. When I suggested visiting him, there was always a reasonable excuse. His texts were dry, functional. "I am fine, Mom. Lots of work. Talk later." That later never came. Samantha was born 2 years after Julian. She was a sweet girl, or so I believed for a long time. Maybe she was, before the world taught her to be ashamed of where she came from. With her, I also made sacrifices. I worked overtime to pay for coding classes, French lessons, everything that could give her an advantage in life. She graduated as a graphic designer. I was at her graduation too. She also hugged me in a rush. Samantha was always more direct with her discomfort. I remember one time I went to visit her at her apartment. She lived in a modern building, with security and a fancy lobby. When I rang the bell, she took a long time to open. When she finally did, I noticed she had hidden the photographs she had on the table. "Mom, you should have called before coming," she told me, blocking the entrance with her body. "I have friends arriving soon." I understood the message. I was not someone she wanted her friends to meet. I made up an excuse and left. I cried on the bus ride home. When she got engaged, her fiancé was a successful architect. Traditional family, generational wealth, private school education. The first time she invited me to dinner with him, she said, "Mom, please wear something elegant." I bought a new dress with money I did not have. I fixed myself up the best I could. During dinner, her fiancé asked me polite questions, but I felt every answer of mine was being evaluated, judged. Samantha interrupted me constantly, correcting what I said, changing the subject when I mentioned something about my life. Her wedding was even more ostentatious than Julian's. I paid what I could to help, though I know what I contributed was insignificant compared to what his family paid. At the wedding, I was also at a separate table. I was also mentioned briefly in the speeches. After her marriage, Samantha practically disappeared from my life. Calls spaced out until they became sporadic messages on important dates. Mother's Day, Christmas, my birthday. Generic messages, without substance, without real interest. Both of them, Julian and Samantha, built lives where I was an uncomfortable stain they preferred to keep hidden. Both married people who reinforced that view. Both turned me into something optional, something they could ignore without consequences. For years, I asked myself what I had done wrong. I replayed conversations, moments, decisions. I tried to find the mistake, the exact moment I lost them. I blamed myself for not being enough, for not being able to give them more, for being too simple for their sophisticated lives. I called, and they did not answer. I sent messages, and they replied days later with short answers. I invited them, and they had prior commitments. I asked about their lives, and they gave me vague answers. But I kept trying, because they were my children, because I had dedicated my entire life to them, because a mother's love, I had been taught, was unconditional and unbreakable, until my 60th birthday arrived, until they left me alone with a table full of food and a heart full of broken hopes, until I understood that unconditional love does not mean accepting being treated as if you do not matter. The weeks after that birthday brought brutal clarity. I stopped calling them. I stopped sending messages asking how they were. I stopped trying to keep alive a relationship that only I was feeding. And a curious thing happened. They did not notice the difference. My silence did not generate worried calls or messages asking if I was okay. Simply, nothing changed. Because my presence or absence in their lives was irrelevant. I focused on what I had always done well: working, planning, building. For years, while they assumed I lived on a shoestring budget, I had been investing every extra penny I earned. Small properties in areas I knew would develop, cheap lots that appreciated over time, modest but consistent investments. I never mentioned it because they never asked. They assumed their mother was a simple woman, with a simple life, with limited resources. That narrative suited them because it freed them from any obligation. If Mom barely has enough to live, there is no need to worry about helping her or including her in expensive plans. But the reality was very different. I had built, silently, patiently, a considerable estate, not out of ambition, but out of survival. Because I knew that someday I would be completely alone and would need to secure my future. The valuation of $20 million was not a surprise to me. I had tracked the value of my properties. I knew how my investments had appreciated, but seeing it officially documented, certified by professionals, gave it a different weight. And apparently, that information reached the wrong ears. Or the right ones, depending on how you look at it. 3 months after ignoring my birthday, 3 months of almost total silence, Julian texted me, summoning me to an urgent family dinner. It was not hard to connect the dots. Someone had told them, maybe a mutual acquaintance, maybe a bank employee, maybe some neighbor who saw movement at my properties. Somehow, the news that their mother had $20 million had reached my children, and suddenly, I was urgent. Suddenly, a family dinner at an upscale restaurant was worth the effort. Suddenly, they needed to talk to me. The hypocrisy was so obvious it was almost comical. 3 months ago, I was not worth a 5-minute call to wish me happy birthday. Now I merited an urgent meeting. I looked at the address of the restaurant Julian had sent me. It was an expensive place, the kind they frequented with their social circles. They had never invited me there before. I had never been presentable enough for those spaces. But now I was. Now that there was money involved, I thought about not going. I thought about ignoring the message like they ignored my birthday. I thought about blocking their numbers and going on with my life without them. It would have been justified, even healthy. But there was something I needed to do, something I needed to say. For decades I had stayed silent. I had accepted. I had endured. I had let them treat me as something disposable without ever really confronting them. This time would be different. This time, I would not go as the hopeful mother looking for crumbs of affection. I would go as the woman who finally understood her own value. The woman who no longer needed validation from children who never knew how to value her. I replied to Julian's message with a single word. Where? He sent me the address immediately. I could almost feel his relief that I had accepted. The days leading up to that dinner passed with a strange slowness. Every morning, I woke up thinking about what I would say, how I would act, what I really expected from that encounter. I knew it would not be a genuine reunion. I knew there was a hidden agenda behind that urgent summons. Julian sent me a second message 2 days before the dinner. Mom, Samantha will be coming too. It will be good for us all to be together. The wording was careful, almost rehearsed. As if he had thought out every word to sound casual but convincing. Samantha texted me a few hours later. Mom, so glad you accepted. It has been so long since we hung out. The fake tone was almost insulting. Since we hung out, as if the absence had been mutual, as if I had also chosen the distance. I did not reply to either message. I simply read them and continued with my routine. But inside, something was changing. A cold clarity was settling in my chest, replacing the sadness I had carried for months. I called Sadie, my trusted accountant. She had handled my investments for years. She had witnessed how I built my wealth from scratch. She was a young but brilliant woman, with a business sense I deeply admired. Sadie, I need you to investigate something for me, I told her when she answered. I want to know exactly what the financial situation of my children is. Both of them. Everything you can find out legally. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Is everything okay, Eleanor? It will be soon, I replied. Just do it with discretion. Sadie was efficient. 2 days later, she sent me a detailed report by certified mail. I opened it in the privacy of my living room, with a cup of coffee that went cold while I read page after page. Julian was in trouble. Serious trouble. He had invested in an import business with 2 partners. The business had collapsed 6 months ago. Debts to suppliers, to banks, to private investors. He was on the verge of a lawsuit. The figures were alarming. He owed close to $3 million. Samantha was no better. She and her husband had bought a commercial property to open a design studio. They had taken out loans using their house as collateral. The studio did not thrive. Payments were behind. The bank was threatening to foreclose on the mortgage. I calculated they needed at least $2 million to save their assets. $5 million between the 2 of them. 5 million reasons to urgently summon me to a family dinner. I closed the report and leaned back on the sofa. I did not feel satisfaction discovering their problems. I felt something more complex. A mixture of sadness for the fact that they only sought me out in their desperation and determination not to let them use me. For years I had dreamed of them needing me. Of them calling me, of them asking for my advice, of them valuing my presence. But not like this. Not only when there was money involved, not after years of negligence and an abandoned birthday that still hurt every time I remembered it. The morning of the dinner I got up early. I took a long bath. I got ready calmly. I chose simple but dignified clothes. A dark, simple dress that made me feel comfortable. Nothing flashy. Nothing that looked like an attempt to impress. I no longer needed to impress anyone. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving. 60 years looked back at me, wrinkles that told stories of hard work, of sleepless nights, of worries for children who never returned that care. But I also saw something new in my eyes. Firmness. I called Sadie again. I need you to be available tonight. I will possibly call you to come to a location. I will send you the address. Are you going to need the documents? She asked, understanding without me having to explain much. All of them, I replied, especially the ones related to the properties in the downtown commercial district. There was a significant silence. Sadie knew exactly which properties I was talking about. Understood. I will be ready. I left my house at 6 in the evening. Dinner was at 7, but I wanted to arrive early. I wanted to have a few minutes to observe the place, to prepare myself mentally, to settle that new determination I had been cultivating. The restaurant was in an exclusive part of the city, elegant facade, large windows, valet parking. The kind of place where every dish cost what I earned in a day when my children were small. The kind of place they went to regularly, but where they had never invited me. I walked in without hesitating. The host received me with a professional smile. Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation? Eleanor, I said simply. He consulted his list and nodded. Of course, your family has not arrived yet. Would you like to wait at the table or at the bar? At the table. He guided me through the restaurant. It was exactly as I imagined. Elegant without warmth, expensive without soul. Tables separated by calculated distances to provide privacy. Dim lighting that made everything look more sophisticated than it probably was. The table was in a discreet corner, private but not hidden. Perfect for a conversation they did not want others to hear, but where they would not feel watched either. I sat facing the entrance. I wanted to see them arrive. I wanted to observe their faces before they saw me. I ordered a mineral water and waited. They arrived together at 7 o'clock sharp. Julian and his wife, Samantha and her husband. The four of them walked in with that confidence that money gives, or at least the illusion of having it. Expensive clothes, elegant accessories, that way of moving that speaks of privilege. I saw them before they saw me. Julian looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that his expensive haircut could not hide. Samantha had that tense smile of someone pretending everything is fine. Their spouses looked equally tense, speaking to each other in low voices. When they finally saw me, their expressions changed. Julian flashed a wide, almost exaggerated smile. Samantha picked up her pace, opening her arms as if she were genuinely excited to see me. Mom, Julian said, upon reaching the table. He leaned in to hug me. A hug longer than usual, more effusive. Fake. So good to see you. Samantha hugged me next. Mom, you look great. That dress looks beautiful on you. She had never commented positively on my clothes before. Never. Their spouses greeted me with forced courtesy. Kisses on the cheek, smiles that did not reach their eyes. We all sat down. The waiter appeared immediately, with menus and the wine list. Let's order a bottle of wine to celebrate, suggested Samantha's husband. Celebrate what? I asked with a neutral voice. There was a brief, awkward silence. Celebrate that we are together, Julian replied quickly. It has been a long time since we shared a moment like this. The five of us, as if we were a united family, as if the last times we had been together had not been tense and brief encounters, as if my 60th birthday had not happened. They ordered wine. I stuck to my mineral water. Julian ordered plates to share, ostentatiously expensive. His wife commented on the restaurant, on how hard it was to get a reservation, on how exclusive the chef was. Samantha asked me superficial questions. How was my health? If I was still going to my yoga classes, if I had seen any good series lately. Questions that sounded like a rehearsed script, like filler conversation before getting to the real topic. I answered with monosyllables. Good. Yes. Some. I did not give them more than what they asked for. I watched them act out their play, waiting for the moment they would drop the mask. Julian's husband spoke about his work, about important projects, about demanding clients. Everything sounded too elaborate, too perfect, as if he were trying to impress me or perhaps convince himself that everything was going well. The food arrived. Artistic dishes, small portions, impeccable presentation. They ate while making comments about every dish, about the flavor combinations, about the chef's technique. I ate in silence, observing. Julian filled my wine glass even though I had not touched it. Mom, relax a little. Enjoy. I am enjoying, I replied without emotion. Samantha exchanged a look with her brother. A quick but revealing look. It was time. They had already fulfilled the part of the family charade. It was time to get to the point. Julian wiped his mouth with his napkin, took a sip of wine, and leaned slightly forward. "Mom, there is something we wanted to talk to you about." There it was. I put down my fork carefully, crossed my hands on my lap, and looked him directly in the eyes. "I am listening." The restaurant continued with its discreet murmur around us. Muffled conversations, contained laughter, the occasional clinking of glasses toasting. All that background noise made our table seem like a silent island in the middle of an ocean of normality. Julian cleared his throat slightly. He had that expression I knew well, the one he wore when he was about to ask for something but wanted it to seem casual. I had seen it when he needed money for college, when he wanted me to lend him the car, when he wanted me to look after something for him without it seeming like an imposition. "Mom, I do not know if you are aware, but lately we have been going through some challenges," he began. His voice sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced these words in front of the mirror. I looked at him without answering. I just waited. I had learned that silence made people reveal more than they planned. His wife put her hand on his in a gesture that seemed supportive, but which I recognized as part of the performance. "It has been a difficult period for everyone," she added with a soft voice. "The economy, you know, businesses are not what they used to be." Samantha nodded with a worried expression. "We have also felt the impact. Mom, things are complicated for many families." Families. As if we were a functional family that shared problems and solutions. As if they had ever consulted me about their difficulties before needing my money. "What kind of challenges?" I asked with a neutral, almost clinical voice. Julian exchanged another look with Samantha. They were coordinated, that was evident. They had planned this conversation. Probably discussed every point, every persuasion strategy. "Well," Julian continued, "a while ago I invested in a business with some partners. It was an excellent opportunity. A market with a lot of potential. Import of specialized products. Something that really seemed solid." He paused, waiting for me to ask more. I did not. I simply kept looking at him. "The thing is, there were complications, problems with suppliers, delays at customs, some partners who did not do their part. You know how these things are." "No, I did not know. Because you never told me about that business. You never asked for my opinion before investing. You never considered that your mother, with decades of experience managing limited finances and making hard decisions, could have something useful to contribute." His wife leaned forward, with an expression of calculated worry. "We have tried to handle this ourselves. Eleanor, we did not want to worry you, but the situation has become delicate." Delicate. What an elegant word to describe the financial disaster my accountant had detailed in her report. $3 million in debt, legal threats, partners looking for someone to blame. Samantha took her turn. "We have also had our problems, Mom." Her voice had a tone of studied vulnerability. "The studio we opened with so much enthusiasm, well, it has been harder than we expected." Her husband nodded with a somber expression. "We invested a lot, maybe too much. We trusted the market would respond, but the competition is fierce. And with the loans we had to take out," he left the sentence unfinished, as if it were too painful to continue, as if the weight of his bad decisions was something worthy of pity and not responsibility. The waiter appeared to clear the plates. We all fell silent while he worked with discreet efficiency. When he walked away, the tension at the table had increased. They could no longer hide behind the food and superficial comments. Julian took a deep breath. "Mom, recently we found out that, well, that you have had quite a bit of success with your investments." There it was. The real reason for this meeting. Not my well-being, not the desire to reconnect, not regret for years of negligence. Only the money. Success? I repeated the word as if I were tasting it. "Yes," Samantha intervened quickly. "We heard your properties appreciated a lot, that you made smart investments. We are so proud of you, Mom. Really impressed that you accomplished that all by yourself." Proud. Impressed. Words I had never heard from their lips before. Words that appeared now, conveniently, when they needed something from me. "You never asked about my investments before," I said with a calm voice. An awkward silence fell over the table. Julian shifted in his chair. "Well, Mom, you were always so private about those things. We did not want to intrude. Private, another elegant word. What I had really been was invisible to them. My activities, my decisions, my entire life had been something that did not interest them enough to ask. Julian's wife tried to soften the moment. What Julian means is that we always respected your privacy. But now that we know how well you have done, it brings us a lot of joy. Joy. Sure. The joy of discovering that the mother they had ignored for years had $20 million. That kind of joy was easy to understand. Julian leaned closer to me. Mom, the reason we wanted to speak with you is because, well, we thought that as a family, we could help each other. As a family. That word again. They used it like a shield, as if invoking blood ties was enough to erase years of abandonment. Help each other? I asked, maintaining my neutral tone. Samantha nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Look, we are going through a tough time, but it is temporary. We just need some financial breathing room to reorganize everything. And you, well, you have resources that you could lend temporarily. Lend. As if it were that simple. As if lending millions of dollars to children who had never shown responsibility or consideration was equivalent to lending a cup of sugar to a neighbor. Samantha's husband added, Of course, everything would be with legal documents, with fair interest, with a clear payment plan. We are not asking for a gift, just an opportunity to get ahead. How considerate, offering me interest on my own money. As if that changed the nature of what they were doing. Julian pulled a folded paper from his pocket. He put it on the table, between us. In fact, we ran some numbers. Between the two of us, we would need around $5 million to resolve our situations. $5 million. They said it as if it were a reasonable figure, as if asking your mother for $5 million after years of ignoring her was something perfectly normal. We know it is a lot, his wife continued quickly. But for someone with an estate of $20 million, it is barely a quarter. And like we said, it would be temporary. In 2 or 3 years, we would pay it all back. They had a whole presentation prepared. They had done calculations, projections, plans. They had invested more time planning how to ask me for money than they had invested in our relationship for years. Mom. Samantha took my hand across the table. Her fingers were cold. Her grip was soft, but insistent. I know we have been distant. I know we have not been the best children. But family is family, and in hard times, family supports each other. Family supports each other. Where was that philosophy when I turned 60 and they left me alone with a table full of food that no one came to share? Where was that family support when I spent Christmas alone because they had more important plans? Julian's husband added, Besides, think of it as an investment. When our businesses recover, and they will, this will be beneficial for everyone. You could even get more involved in our lives, in our companies. It would be a way to be closer. There was the final lure, the promise of closeness, of inclusion, of finally being part of their lives. Everything I had wished for years, now offered as an incentive for me to open my wallet. Julian unfolded the paper he had placed on the table. It was numbers, projections, a breakdown of how they would use the money and how they would pay it back. Everything very professional, very convincing for someone who did not know the truth behind those figures. Look, Mom, he pointed to the columns of numbers. Here everything is detailed. $3 million for me, to settle the business debts and have capital to restructure. $2 million for Samantha and her husband, to save their house and relaunch the studio. I studied them while they awaited my reaction. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on me, full of anxious expectation. I could feel the tension, the barely contained need. This was not a casual request. It was desperation disguised as a business plan. And what happens if you cannot pay the money back? I asked. My question hung in the air like a drop of ink in clear water, expanding, tainting everything around it. I saw how their expressions changed subtly. The studied confidence cracked just for a second before they composed it again. Julian forced a laugh. Mom, that is a very pessimistic question. Of course we will be able to pay you back. We have a solid plan. Plans do not always work, I replied calmly. You yourselves just admitted that your businesses failed despite having plans that seemed solid. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer the expectant silence of someone waiting for a favorable answer. It was the uncomfortable silence of someone who did not expect to be questioned. Julian's wife cleared her throat. Eleanor, I understand your concern. But this time is different. We have learned from our mistakes. We know exactly what went wrong and how to fix it. Besides, Samantha added, with a soft but urgent voice, we are not asking for a gift, Mom. It is a loan. With legal documents, like we told you. You would be protected. Protected. What an interesting word. As if a document could protect me from the pain of being used by my own children. As if a contract could compensate for years of neglect. Samantha's husband leaned forward, adopting a more serious, business-like tone. Look, Eleanor, I know this seems like a lot, but let's think about this rationally. You have $20 million. $5 million is 25%. You would still have $15 million left for yourself. It is more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. I stared at him. This man who barely knew me, who had been in my life only through Samantha, who had never shown the slightest interest in me as a person, was now telling me how much money was enough for me. And how do you know how much is enough for me? I asked with a dangerously quiet voice. He blinked, surprised by the question. Well, what I mean is that $5 million would not leave you in financial trouble. You would still be a very wealthy woman, Julian intervened quickly. What he is trying to say, Mom, is that this would not affect you significantly. But for us, it would be the difference between losing everything and having a chance to recover. There was the emotional pressure, the contrast between my supposed abundance and their urgent need, as if my obligation as a mother was to sacrifice myself because they did not know how to manage their finances. Tell me about your import business, I said suddenly, looking directly at Julian. What exactly went wrong? The question caught him off guard. He had expected me to accept or reject, not to investigate the details. Well, it was several factors. Give me a specific one, I interrupted. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The suppliers. They turned out not to be as reliable as we thought. They sent poor quality merchandise. There were constant delays. And you did not vet the suppliers before signing contracts? Yes, of course we did. But you know how these things are. The information they gave us was misleading. And the partners, I continued. You said some did not do their part. How did you choose your partners? Julian exchanged a quick look with his wife. They were contacts from the business circle. People with good reputations. Did you verify their finances? Their business histories? Mom. His tone was becoming defensive. I do not understand where you are going with this. I want to understand how you made decisions that resulted in a debt of $3 million. I replied simply. Julian's face tensed up. How do you know exactly how much I owe? The question slipped out before he could stop it. There it was. The first slip. The first crack in his carefully constructed facade. You just confirmed it for me, I said quietly. Samantha rushed to intervene, trying to soften the rising tension. Mom, I understand you want to know details. It is natural, but this is not an interrogation. We are your family. We come to you with trust, with honesty, asking for your help. I turned to her. And your design studio? Tell me what happened there. Samantha blinked. I already told you, the market is very competitive. No, tell me specifically. What services did you offer? Who were your target clients? What was your marketing strategy? My daughter looked at me as if I were speaking another language. Mom, I do not think you need to know all that to lend you $2 million? Yes, I think I need to know. Her husband spoke then, with a tone that intended to be patient but sounded condescending. Eleanor, with all due respect, these are very technical questions about the design and business world. I do not want you to get confused with details that maybe you would not understand. I finished the sentence. Because I am just an older woman without a sophisticated education? The atmosphere at the table changed abruptly. The pretense of family cordiality was crumbling rapidly. No one is saying that, Julian said firmly. But Mom, you are being unnecessarily difficult. We are just asking you to help us. As a family, added Samantha, with a tone that was starting to sound more desperate than sweet. I looked at both of them. My children, the babies I had held in my arms, the children I had raised alone, the teenagers for whom I had sacrificed everything. Now they were strangers sitting in front of me, strangers who only saw me as a source of money. When I turned 60, I said slowly, I prepared a special dinner. Do you remember? The change of subject threw them off. Julian furrowed his brow. Mom, that has nothing to do with. Do you remember? I repeated, more firmly. Samantha lowered her gaze. Mom, we already apologized for that. No, I said clearly. You never apologized. You sent vague texts days later. Something came up. Schedules got crossed. But never a real apology. Julian sighed with exasperation. Okay, we are sorry. We are very sorry. It was a mistake, okay? But we cannot change the past. We are here now, trying to build a better future. A better future for whom? I asked. For everyone, his wife replied quickly. For the whole family. Family. I repeated the word, as if it were new to my vocabulary. It is curious how that word appears so much tonight. I did not hear it much over the last few years. I did not hear it on my birthday. I did not hear it during the Christmases I spent alone. I did not hear it in any of the moments when I needed you. Mom, please. Samantha reached her hand toward me again, but this time I pulled mine away. Do not be like this. We know we have made mistakes, but now we are trying to make things right. Make things right? My voice rose slightly. Enough for a couple of diners at nearby tables to turn briefly. Making things right is showing up when you need money. It is summoning me urgently, not because you miss me, not because you want to know how I am, but because you are in financial trouble. Julian's wife put her hand on his arm, as if warning him to keep calm. Eleanor, I understand you are upset. You have every right, but punishing us now, when we need you most, is not going to fix the past. I am not punishing you, I replied, with a calm that surprised even myself. I am asking you the questions that any sensible person would ask before lending $5 million. Samantha's husband leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. His body language had changed completely. He was no longer the polite son-in-law. He was a frustrated man who was not getting what he wanted. Look, Eleanor. His tone was different now, harder. Let's be honest here. That money you have, a big part comes from properties you bought in areas that developed because people like us, professionals, invested in those areas. Your wealth is not just a product of your effort. It is also the result of the economic ecosystem that we are part of. I looked at him, unable to believe what I had just heard. You are telling me that my money is partly thanks to you? Not exactly. Julian tried to soften his brother-in-law's words. But yes, in a sense, we are all part of the same economic system. And therefore, I interrupted, I owe you something. That is the logic. Samantha shook her head quickly. No, Mom, it is not like that. Please, do not twist what we are saying. Then tell me exactly what you are saying. I looked at all of them. Tell me without beating around the bush, without euphemisms, without this performance of a united family. What exactly do you expect from me? Julian took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice had an edge that had not been there before. We expect you to act like a mother, that you support your children when they are in trouble, that you use your resources to help your family. How did you support me when I needed you? I asked. When did you need us? Samantha sounded genuinely confused. You never asked us for help, Mom. I should not have to ask you to show up for my birthday, I said with a low but firm voice. I should not have to beg you to call me once in a while. I should not have to plead for crumbs of your attention. The silence that followed my words was dense, loaded with all the truths we had avoided for years. The diners around us continued with their lives, oblivious to the silent collapse that was happening at our table. Julian clenched his jaw. I could see how he fought to maintain composure, not to lose control of this conversation that clearly was not going according to his plan. Mom, this makes no sense. You are mixing emotional things with a practical financial decision. Ah, yes. I tilted my head slightly. And you are not using emotional manipulation by calling me for an urgent family dinner, instead of simply asking me for a business meeting? His wife intervened with a tense voice. It is not manipulation. You are his mother. We thought you would want to know what we are going through. Now you want me to know what you are going through. I let out a brief laugh, without humor. Where was that transparency the last 3 years? The last 5? When did you decide that I deserved to know about your lives? Samantha had tears in her eyes. I was not sure if they were genuine or part of the strategy. Mom, I know we have been bad children. I accept it. But are you going to let us lose everything just to punish us? Are you going to allow your own family to sink? I am not sinking you, I replied calmly. You are sinking yourselves with decisions you made without consulting me, without including me, probably while you were ashamed for anyone to know your mother was a simple worker. Julian's husband let out a sigh of frustration. This is ridiculous. We are going in circles. Eleanor, the question is simple. Are you going to help your children or not? The way he put it, so direct, so stripped of any pretense, was almost refreshing. At least we were no longer pretending this was about family and love. The question is not that simple, I replied. The real question is, why should I invest $5 million in people who have proven to be financially irresponsible and emotionally distant? Julian slammed his napkin onto the table with more force than necessary. Because we are your children. Because you gave us life. Because a mother does not abandon her children when they are in trouble. His words hit me like an invisible slap. A mother does not abandon her children, I repeated slowly. How interesting that you use those words. Tell me, what do you call what you did to me? We did not abandon you, protested Samantha. We just were busy. Life is complicated, Mom. We have jobs, responsibilities. I had jobs too, I interrupted her. Multiple jobs. And yet I was always available for you. I always answered your calls. I always showed up when you needed me. Even when you needed me just to watch your things while you traveled or to cook for you when you were too busy to do it yourselves. Julian's wife tried a different approach. Eleanor, I understand your pain, truly, and you are right in everything you say. But think about this. This is your chance to change the dynamic, to be part of their lives in a more meaningful way. If you help them now, they will be grateful. Things could be different. You are telling me I must buy their affection? I asked directly. No, Julian shook his head vehemently. Do not put it like that. What she means is that this could be a new beginning for all of us. A new beginning that costs $5 million. Samantha's husband leaned forward, his patience clearly exhausted. Look, Eleanor, let's be realistic. What are you going to do with $20 million? How much longer are you going to live? 10 years? 15? Do you really need all that money for yourself? The words hung in the air like poison. Samantha went pale. That is not what he meant. I think that is exactly what he meant, I replied with an icy voice. I am old. I probably won't live much longer. Why do I need the money? Better to give it to you now. Julian glared at his brother-in-law before turning to me. Mom, that came out wrong. But you have to admit he has a point. Eventually, that money will be ours anyway. You are our only family. We are your only heirs. There it was. The naked truth, unadorned. They were no longer asking. They were claiming what they considered was already theirs by right. So you are counting on my inheritance? I asked with clinical curiosity, as if I were observing an interesting specimen under a microscope. Do not say it like that, Samantha sounded increasingly desperate. But Mom, be honest. Didn't you always plan to leave us your estate when you are gone? I planned many things, I replied. I also planned that my children would visit me regularly. I planned that they would call me to see how I was. I planned that they would show up on my 60th birthday. Plans change. The implication of my words fell on them like cold water. Julian stiffened. What exactly are you saying? I am saying that none of you should assume anything about my money or my plans for it. His wife leaned forward urgently. Eleanor, please, think this through. If you do not help us, we are going to lose everything. Samantha's house, Julian's business. Years of work are going down the drain. Is that what you want? What do I want? I repeated the question as if I had never asked it to myself. You know, no one has asked me what I want in years. You tell me what you need, what you expect, what I should do. But no one ever asks what I want. Samantha's husband leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. Fine. We are asking you. What do you want, Eleanor? I looked directly at him. I want to know why my daughter did not come to my birthday. The real reason, not the excuse about cross schedules. Samantha opened her mouth, but I raised my hand to stop her. And I want Julian to tell me why he called me only 3 times all of last year, and 2 of those times were to ask me to receive a package at my house because he wouldn't be there. Julian avoided my gaze. Mom, we already talked about this. No, I interrupted him. We have not talked about this. You have given excuses, you have minimized, you have deflected. But we have never talked honestly about how you have treated me. Julian's wife sighed with exasperation. And what good does it do to talk about that now? The past is the past. What matters is the present and the future. The past matters, I said firmly. The past is the only thing I have to evaluate if you are going to keep the promises you are making now. And the past tells me you are people who promise and do not deliver. Who say, I'll call you and never call. Who say, see you soon and disappear for months. Samantha finally broke down crying. Tears ran down her cheeks as she spoke with a broken voice. Mom, please, we are going to lose our house. Do you understand that? The bank is going to foreclose. We are going to be on the street. You are not going to be on the street, I replied, with more knowledge than I should have. You are going to lose a property in which you invested recklessly. You will have to look for a more modest place to live, like I did for decades. Julian looked at me with growing suspicion. You speak as if you know exactly what our situation is. I know enough, I replied, without giving more details. You have been investigating us. His voice rose in pitch, spying on us. I have been being prudent, I corrected. Something you should have done before getting into the problems you are in now. Samantha's husband hit the table softly with his fist, making the glassware clink. This is unbelievable. We came here in good faith, being honest about our problems, asking family for help. And you meet us with this? With accusations and reproaches? You came here out of obligation, I corrected him. Because you have no other choice. If you had access to that money any other way, I would still be receiving no calls. Julian stood up abruptly. You know what, Mom? Maybe this was a mistake. We thought we could talk to you like adults, but clearly you are too resentful to have a rational conversation. Sit down, Julian, I said with a quiet but authoritative voice. Something in my tone made him obey, although his expression was of barely contained fury. I am going to tell you something, I continued, and I want you to listen to me very carefully. For 60 years I have been the mother you needed me to be, the one who worked tirelessly, who sacrificed everything, who was always available. And for most of your adult lives, you have been the children you chose to be, distant, critical, ashamed of me. Mom, Samantha tried to interrupt. I have not finished, I said firmly. Now you are here asking me for $5 million. Not because you love me, not because you value our relationship, but because you have no other choice. And you expect me to simply open my wallet because you invoke the word family. I looked at everyone, one by one. But family is not just a word you use when you need something. Family is what you build day by day, call by call, visit by visit. And you built nothing with me. The words floated over the table, like a final sentence. I saw how each of them processed what I had just said, how their expressions went from surprise to indignation, from denial to a barely contained rage. Julian was the first to regain his speech. His voice trembled, not with emotion but with fury. You know what, Mom? You are right. We have not been perfect. But you were not the perfect mother you now pretend to have been either. I looked at him without blinking. Explain yourself. You were always working, he continued, the words coming out faster now, as if he had been holding them in for years. Always tired, always stressed. You never went to my soccer games. You were never at the school meetings. You left us with neighbors while you worked double shifts. I worked double shifts so you could go to a private university? I replied with a dangerously calm voice. So you had decent clothes, food on the table, a roof over your head? I did not ask you to do all that. His voice rose enough for several tables to turn and look at us. I did not ask you to be a martyr. Maybe if you had worked less and been more present, our relationship would be different now. The twisted logic of his words almost made me laugh. So you blame me for working too hard to give you a good life. How convenient. Samantha joined in, her voice also loaded with years of unexpressed complaints. And you always made us feel guilty. Mom worked so hard for you. I sacrificed myself for you. As if we had to apologize for existing. I never said that, I replied firmly. You did not have to say it. Samantha wiped her tears with anger. It was in every tired look, in every sigh when you came home from work. We grew up feeling like we were a burden. The inversion of reality was so perfect, I almost admired their ability to rewrite history. They, who had ignored me for years, were now accusing me of having made them feel guilty for my existence. Interesting, I said with a neutral voice. So, according to you, I am responsible for working to support you, and I am also responsible for making you feel bad about it. There was no way to win, was there? Julian's wife intervened with a conciliatory but condescending tone. Eleanor, what they are trying to say is that the relationship between you is complicated. There are wounds on both sides, but this is not the time to resolve decades of family issues. The urgency now is financial. The urgency is yours, not mine, I pointed out. Samantha's husband leaned forward, his face flushed. You know what? You are selfish. There, I said it. You have more money than you will ever be able to use, and you do not want to help your own family. That is pure selfishness. Selfishness? I repeated the word slowly. I worked since I was 23 without stopping. I raised 2 children alone. I sacrificed constantly, and now that I finally have something for myself, I am selfish for not giving it away to people who have treated me as invisible. Julian hit the table with his open palm. We are not people. We are your children. Does that mean nothing to you? I stood up slowly. Everyone stayed still, surprised by the movement. I looked at them from above, feeling for the first time in years that I had control of the situation. It means everything to me, I said with a clear and firm voice. That is why it hurts so much. Because you are my children, and yet you chose to treat me as if I did not matter, because I loved you unconditionally, and you turned that love into something conditional on your convenience. Mom, sit down. Samantha reached her hand toward me. Please, let's not cause a scene. A scene? I looked at her. Are you worried someone will see us? Are you ashamed of me even now? It is not that. Her voice was small, defeated. It is exactly that, I replied. It has always been that. I was never good enough for you. My job was not prestigious enough. My clothes were not elegant enough. My education was not refined enough. I never fit into the image you wanted to project. Julian stood up too, facing me. If you hate us so much, if we have hurt you so much, then say it clearly. Say you are not going to help us, and let's end this. I looked him in the eyes. I saw the boy he was. The young man who was ashamed of me at his graduation. The man who called me only when he needed something. And I felt something release inside me. I do not hate you, I said quietly. But I am not going to allow you to use me either. I am not going to reward years of negligence with millions of dollars just because now you need me. Then it is a no. Julian's voice was hard, final. You let us lose everything. No, I corrected. You already lost. You lost long before coming here tonight. And it was not for lack of money. Samantha sobbed openly now. How can you be so cruel? How can you let us suffer like this? Cruel? The word came out louder than I intended. I am cruel? You left me alone on my 60th birthday. You left me sitting for hours waiting for you. That was not cruel? It was a mistake, shouted Samantha. A damn mistake. Are you going to punish us forever for that? I am not punishing you, I said with a calm that contrasted with her hysteria. I am simply not going to rescue you from the consequences of your own decisions. Julian's husband stood up too. This is a waste of time. Clearly she has her mind made up. She probably already had this decision made before coming. You are right, I admitted. I did. But I came anyway because I needed to hear you. I needed to confirm that you really only wanted my money and not me. We want both things, Julian tried one last argument. We want a relationship with you, and we need financial help. Why does it have to be one thing or the other? Because the order matters, I replied. If you had built the relationship first, if you had valued me before needing my money, this conversation would be different. But you came to me only when there were $20 million at stake. I took my purse from the chair. Dinner is paid for, I said. Eat whatever you want. I am done here. If you walk out that door, Julian's voice was a barely veiled threat. Do not come looking for us again. Do not call us when you are alone and need company. This ends here. I stopped and looked at him over my shoulder. Julian, I have been alone for years. One dinner more or less will not change that. I mean it, Mom. His voice cracked slightly. If you turn your back on us now, you lose us forever. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the impulse to give in, to go back to the table, to sign the checks, to buy their presence in my life even if it was fake, because he was my son, and part of me still loved him despite everything. But then I remembered the empty table on my birthday. I remembered the years of unanswered calls. I remembered every time they made me feel small, insignificant, dispensable. Then you lose me, I said simply. But let me be very clear. It is not you who are losing me. It is I who am finally letting go of the illusion of having children who love me. I turned to leave, but Samantha's voice stopped me one more time. Mom, wait, please. I turned slowly. She was standing, trembling. What if we promise to change? What if we swear things will be different? Would you give us a chance? I looked at her in silence for a long moment. Samantha, how many chances do you think I already gave you? She did not answer. Every time you did not answer my calls and I tried again. Every time you canceled plans and I forgave you. Every time you treated me like a nuisance and I kept opening the door for you. You already had all your chances. And then, with a clarity that surprised myself, I added, but there is something else you need to know. I sat back down in my chair. The movement threw them all off. They had expected me to leave, to run from the confrontation. But I had not finished. The most important part was still missing. Sit down, I said with a quiet but authoritative voice. They hesitated, exchanging confused looks. But one by one, they returned to their seats. The dynamic had changed completely. It was no longer them summoning me. It was I who controlled this conversation. You said you need $5 million between the two of you, I began, looking directly at them. 3 for Julian, 2 for Samantha. To save businesses that failed due to bad decisions and lack of planning. Julian opened his mouth to protest, but I stopped him with a gesture of my hand. What you do not know, I continued, is that I know exactly what your situation is. Not just the numbers you told me, but the whole truth. Julian's face went slightly pale. What are you talking about? Julian, your import business did not fail just because of unreliable suppliers. It failed because you invested money you did not have in merchandise you did not understand, with partners who had a history of fraud that you never bothered to investigate. His wife tensed in her chair. How do you know that? Because unlike you, I do investigate before making financial decisions, I replied. And Samantha, your design studio did not fail because of the competition. It failed because you spent 80% of the initial capital on decoration and image, and only 20% on real marketing and client acquisition. Samantha stared at me with wide eyes. You have been spying on us. I have been being diligent, I corrected, like any sensible person would do before considering an investment of millions of dollars. Samantha's husband leaned forward aggressively. This is an invasion of privacy. You have no right. I have every right, I interrupted him coldly, especially when you come asking for my money. Or did you expect me to simply sign a check without asking questions? Julian ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. Okay, we made mistakes. We admit it. Where do you want to go with this? I want you to understand something very important, I said, letting every word carry weight. I am not denying you the money just because you hurt me. I am denying it because you are a terrible financial risk. Any sensible investor would do the same. Julian's wife stiffened. We are your family, not an investment. You were the ones who turned this into a financial transaction, I pointed out. You did not come as a family seeking emotional support. You came with spreadsheets and payment plans. So I am evaluating you with the same criteria I would use in any business. The silence that followed was heavy. I could see the reality settling over them. I was not going to give in. There was no pleading or manipulation that would work. Samantha tried one last approach, her voice barely a whisper. Mom, if you do not help us, we are going to lose everything. Do you understand that? Everything. I understand perfectly, I replied. But let me ask you something. When you did not show up for my birthday, did you think about what I lost that night? About the humiliation of waiting for hours? About the pain of confirming that you did not care? No one answered. That night I lost everything too, I continued with a firm voice. I lost the illusion of having a family that loved me. I lost the hope that someday you would value me. I lost years of clinging to a one-sided relationship, and you did not even notice my loss. Julian hit the table softly with his fist. So this is revenge? You hurt us because we hurt you. No, I shook my head. This is self-preservation. I am finally choosing myself instead of waiting for you to choose me. Julian's husband stood up abruptly. I have heard enough. This is ridiculous. Let's go. But Julian did not move. He looked at me with a mix of anger and something else. Fear? Mom, this cannot end like this. There has to be something we can do. Something we can say. There was something you could do, I said quietly. Show up for my birthday. Call me occasionally without needing something. Treat me with basic minimum respect. But that time has passed. Samantha stood up too, trembling. You know what? You are right. We were bad children. I admit it completely. But you are going to die alone, Mom. Old, bitter, and alone. And that money you protect so much will not give you the warmth you will need in your final years. Her words sought to hurt me, but they only confirmed what I already knew. To them, I only had value as a source of resources, emotional or financial. I prefer to die alone than to live begging for affection, I replied calmly. And as for the money, at least I will have the satisfaction of knowing I did not waste it on people who never valued it nor me. Julian's wife grabbed her purse. This is useless. She already made her decision. Let's go. But I had not finished. The final revelation was still missing, the one that would change everything. Before you go, I said, taking out my phone, there is something else you should know. The four of them stopped, looking at me suspiciously. I dialed a number and put the phone on speaker. It rang twice before they answered. Eleanor, I am outside as we agreed, said Sadie's voice over the speaker. Do you need me to come in? Yes, Sadie, I replied, without taking my eyes off my children. Please, come to the table and bring the documents. I hung up and looked at their confused faces. There is someone I want you to meet. Julian furrowed his brow. What documents? What are you talking about? I did not answer. I simply waited. 2 minutes later, Sadie appeared at the entrance of the restaurant. I recognized her immediately. Young, professional, with a leather briefcase under her arm. She walked directly toward our table with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what role she played in this drama. Good evening. She greeted everyone politely before turning to me. Eleanor, I brought everything you asked for. Thanks, Sadie. I pointed to an empty chair from a nearby table. Please, sit down. I want my children to meet you. Sadie is my accountant and financial advisor for 8 years now. Sadie shook hands with each of them professionally. I could see the growing confusion on their faces. Sadie, I said formally, could you explain to my children about the properties in the commercial district downtown? A small smile appeared on Sadie's face. She opened her briefcase and took out a folder. Of course, Eleanor owns 4 commercial properties in that zone. She acquired them 3 years ago, when the area was still in development. Julian looked at me without understanding. And what does that have to do with us? Sadie continued, her voice neutral and professional. One of those properties is the building where Samantha and her husband's design studio operates. I saw the color drain from Samantha's face. What? And another one. Sadie turned to the next page. Is the commercial space where Julian had his import business before it closed? The silence at the table was absolute. But there is more. Sadie took out another document. 2 weeks ago, Eleanor acquired the mortgage debt on Samantha's house. And 10 days ago, she bought the debts of Julian's business from his main creditors. The words fell like bombs onto the table. The world seemed to stop at our table. I could see how each of them processed the information, how their brains struggled to comprehend the implications of what Sadie had just revealed. Julian was the first to find his voice, though it came out trembling. What does that mean exactly? Sadie looked at me, waiting for my authorization to continue. I nodded. It means, she explained with a clear and professional voice, that Eleanor is now the primary creditor for both of you. Samantha's house, technically, belongs to her if payments are not met. And Julian's commercial debts are also in her hands. Samantha stood up so abruptly her chair fell backward. That is impossible. When? How? I started the process 2 weeks ago, I replied calmly, right after receiving the invitation to this dinner. When I knew exactly why you were summoning me. Samantha's husband had a face completely red. This is manipulation. You set a trap for us. No, I corrected firmly. You put yourselves in this position with your own decisions. I simply made sure to have control over the situation before coming here. Julian was gripping the edge of the table as if he needed physical support. Why? Why would you do this? Because I needed you to know something, I said, looking them directly in the eyes. I needed you to understand that I am not the weak, powerless woman you always believed I was. I am not just your ignorant mother who cleaned offices. I am a woman who built an empire while you underestimated me. Sadie took more documents from her briefcase. Eleanor has also prepared a proposal. You can keep your properties and restructure your debts, but under very specific conditions. What conditions? Asked Julian's wife with a dull voice. I took the documents from Sadie's hands and placed them on the table, one in front of Julian and another in front of Samantha. You can read them calmly, but I will summarize the main points. I paused, letting the tension build. First, the debt is restructured to 10 years with an interest rate of 3%, well below market. Essentially, I am giving you money almost for free. I saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes, but I continued before they could speak. Second, every month you must present complete financial reports. I will oversee every major business decision. No more impulsive investments or irresponsible spending. Julian's husband began to protest, but I stopped him with a look. Third, if you miss a single payment, if you hide information, if you try to sell properties without my authorization, I foreclose immediately. No second chances. You lose everything. Julian was reading the document with trembling hands. This is like having a permanent supervisor. Exactly, I confirmed. Because you have proven you are not capable of handling your finances responsibly. I assume that control. Samantha was looking at her document without really reading it. Tears were running down her face. And if we say no? If we reject these conditions? Then, I said with a neutral voice, I execute the debts. You lose the house, you lose the businesses, you lose everything. And I resell those properties to the highest bidder. It is completely legal and within my rights as a creditor. The silence was deafening. Julian's wife was the first to fully understand. You have trapped us. This is not generosity. It is absolute control. Yes, I admitted without shame. But it is more than you would have if I let the banks execute your debts. At least with this option, you keep something. Julian dropped the document onto the table. His voice was barely a whisper. How could you do this to us? How could I? I repeated the question, feeling years of pain finally turn into power. Very easy, Julian. I worked every day of my life. I invested smartly. I educated myself financially. I built relationships with the right people. All while you assumed I was just a simple mother without relevance. I stood up, looking at them from above. For years you held the power in this relationship. You decided when you called me, when you visited me, when you included me in your lives. Now that power has changed hands. Samantha was sobbing openly. Mom, please. It cannot be like this. You cannot control us this way. Then reject the offer, I said simply. The decision is yours. You can accept my conditions and keep something, or you can refuse and lose everything. But do not look at me as the villain here. You created this situation. Samantha's husband stood up violently. This is revenge. Pure and simple revenge for a forgotten birthday. It was not just a birthday. My voice rose for the first time all night. It was decades of being treated as insignificant. It was years of unanswered calls. It was a whole lifetime of being the last option. The birthday was simply the moment I finally opened my eyes. Julian stood up too, facing me. If we sign this, what do we really gain? A mother who controls our every move, who constantly reminds us of our mistakes. You gain a chance, I replied. A chance you do not deserve, but that I am giving you anyway. Because despite everything, you are still my children. This is not love, said Samantha between sobs. This is punishment. No, I corrected her with a soft but firm voice. Love is working double shifts to pay for your education. Love is being available whenever you needed me. Love is preparing a birthday party, hoping you would show up. This is not love or punishment. This is justice. Sadie closed her briefcase and stood up. The documents are here. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires and we proceed with standard foreclosures. I took my purse again. This time there would be no more interruptions. One last thing, I said before leaving. If you accept these conditions, we will have a relationship, but it will be on my terms. No more ignoring me until you need something. No more treating me like something shameful. Either you treat me with the respect I deserve, or there will be no relationship at all. And if we choose not to have a relationship? Julian's voice was defiant, but I could hear the fear underneath. Then I execute the debts and go on with my life. I replied with a calm that surprised even myself. I have lived without you these last few months. I discovered I can be happy alone. You are not essential to my happiness. But I, apparently, am essential to your financial survival. The truth of those words fell upon them like an unbearable weight. I turned to leave. Sadie walked beside me. This time, none of them tried to stop me. When we reached the entrance of the restaurant, I heard Samantha's voice behind me. Mom, I stopped, but I did not turn around. Will you ever forgive us? The question floated in the air. I could have ignored it. I could have left without answering. But I decided to give them one last truth. I turned halfway, enough for them to see my profile. I do not know if I will forgive you, but I know this. I finally forgave myself for allowing you to treat me like that for so long. And that is the only peace I really need. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night. Sadie walked beside me in respectful silence. Do you think they will accept? She asked when we reached my car. Probably, I replied. They have no other choice. But that is no longer what is important. Then what is important? I looked at her and smiled. A small but genuine smile. That for the first time in 60 years, I took control of my own life. That I stopped waiting for them to value me and started valuing myself. That I understood that love is not begged for. It is offered or rejected, but never pleaded for. I got into my car and started the engine. As I drove away, I saw through the rearview mirror the illuminated restaurant where my children were still sitting, probably reading those documents, probably finally understanding that their mother was not who they thought she was. I did not feel triumph or joy over their situation, but I did not feel guilt either. I felt something much more valuable, peace. The peace of knowing I had closed a cycle, that I had set boundaries, that I had reclaimed my dignity. I drove home in silence, thinking about the 60th birthday I had spent alone. That night had been the end of something. But tonight was the beginning of something new, the beginning of Eleanor Dallas. Not as the abandoned mother, but as the woman who finally chose herself. And that, I discovered as the city lights passed by my window, was more than enough.